about some personal reflections of my PhD research story. And the original intent was, after I defended my proposal, is to present the proposal to my colleagues. But as I was working on my proposal and through the process, my advisor once said to me that the PhD is about the process, not just the outcomes. And this was a time when I said to myself, you know what? It might be worth talking about something that helps everyone. I share my own reflections rather than talking about research, which might be terribly boring to everyone. So from that perspective, I thought to give this session this flavor. So I'll start talking about my story and talk about a few insights and tips, if you will. And why I said story, I think one of the concepts that I came to learn starting here as a graduate student is the power of stories, whether it's organizational stories or models as unfolding stories, if you will. And even writing papers, presentations. How are you telling your story? How are you getting people to listen to your story? And what are interesting and insights you have in your story? So that's why I said, okay, I'll share a story. So my research story, some of the jargons here we're talking about, sometimes they're very system dynamics related, but I mean, anybody, please stop me and ask me what I mean. So my research story starts with a timeline. So I do have a timeline. And in system dynamics, we typically think about behavior over time, how things change over time. So I had to conceptualize a variable, which is, I thought, divergence, for that matter. It has a negative, I would say, connotation, but as a PhD student, this is something you deal with day and night. And I put the 0 would be the nominal there. And in my story, when I first arrived, I was thinking about a topic in innovation sustainability in R&D organizations. So I came marching in, talking to my advisor and said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to build system dynamics models about organizations and their innovation sustainability. Of course, I started with taking classes. In one of the early classes, I was exposed to a class project where we had to do a real-world system dynamics. And it was about system dynamics for organizational change. And I did a project in WPI. It was about university growth. And this work was presented in a colloquium conference. And we submitted it recently to a publication. So that was a deliverable or an outcome, if you will. Parallel to that, in 2012, I was working on my qualifier exam after finishing 18 credits of coursework. And I came to the concept of composition dynamics and the path of change. This is which is an explanation for the dynastic cycle or the farmer's bandit soldier model. That's the work done by my advisor and my committee member. Because the qualifier here, you take a couple of papers, you rebuild the models, and you provide a critique to that model. So this was a time when I stumbled by this concept and thought it's very interesting, but I don't know what to do with it. At the same time, because
I get it. You can keep talking.
Okay, thank you. Because I was considering innovation in organizations, I was looking in the literature for any themes in organizations that continue to be innovative through the years. And one concept that came up, which is dissent in organization, which is people who have different ideas and opinions that doesn't necessarily align with the corporate strategy. However, they could become very helpful or handy at some point. So I like that, but I didn't know what to do with it. I thought it's a very interesting concept. as I was pondering with this after my qualifier, I was asked by a group at MIT to participate in a modeling project for a startup university. And the way this connection was made is that I presented my work at a system dynamics colloquium that we do with University of Albany and MIT. And someone who did not attend that talk have seen the proceedings of that talk and saw my presentation. He looked at it, he thought it's interesting. He talked to someone and they contacted me and they worked on that project. So as you may see now, I had two different branches. I was doing work that continuously evolving in some branch and a couple of ideas that I didn't know what to do with. And that outcome from that project here was developed further into a publication. So eventually something I was not planning for, but the momentum was there and I was encouraged, okay, publish it, despite the ambiguity of what is my research project going to be. But at some point, as I was working on this, my advisor suggested, because I was exploring different concepts of different type of organizations to look at, he said, what about higher education institutions? Because, as you may see, these two projects were very much aligned with higher education institutions. However, my intention was, what about higher education and its relationship to innovation? And but if you look at it, universities and research universities are a subset of an R&D organization, but they also produce students too. So their product is not only tangible projects or intangible concepts, but there are outcomes. Students are actually coming and doing and joining these organizations. So, okay, I could buy that. But what about the remaining concepts? Because I was interested in this. So I started looking at the literature, reading newspapers, just getting myself immersed on what's happening in higher education institutions. And I started to see patterns that there is change first in higher education institutions. There are change of governance, change of management styles, if you will, adapting very new concepts from the corporate world, where you cannot adapt these concepts without the structure behind it and how it is managed. And there where I started seeing, okay, now I see change. I'm seeing how, a change in the governance structure of these universities, where very much dissent comes into the picture. And with these three, we were able to, okay, there is an interesting dynamics here. And I built a model through a class project eventually. It was not out of my reflections or so, but I was taking a class, the latent structures class, where we looked at this structure in depth, and this was my reading, and I thought there is a synergy here, and we had a...
Latent structures and system dynamics is there's everything you see around you that's like a tangible organization or an intentional design. Latent structure is what's invisible that might drive performance. So it would be things that are not immediately obvious within a university that you couldn't point to or look at a map and see, but might very well affect what's going on.
Thank you very much. This was a very good point to the next step in my work. So I had presentations, a published paper, a couple of conference papers, but still you need to frame this in order that this is a legitimate dissertation. So I was taking classes in organizational behavior, I would say, and I came to know about the concept of organizational design, where in organizational design, you look at the tangibles and intangibles, the manifest and the latent, what is visible, as Tim said, and what is invisible, as everybody talks about, or think about, sharing without sharing. All these concepts are there, whether it's the organizational culture or norms or values. All these are intangibles. So I started seeing, you know what, my work here, which was very much concerned with strategy and resources, etc., was very much in the manifest structure or the tangible view of the organization. whereas the descent and the composition were very much, okay, thank you, very much aligned with the latent structures or the invisible part. So I thought now I looked at the both sides of the organization, and I have something to say from both sides. And of course, higher education institutions, this would all coalesce together into a model-based organizational design. So I'm using modeling and simulation because that's my major. I'm interested in organization and in organizational design in particular, in the context of higher education institutions. So we have the context, which is higher education institutions. We have the view, which is organizational design, and we have the methodology, which is system dynamics. And with this, I was able to convince the committee that, okay, this is my work. A couple of points or disclaimers that I haven't talked about at the beginning is that this is a personal story, so it might not apply to everyone, because somebody might say, how could you spend all that time without doing this? Are you not working on a grant or a project? That's a different dynamics. But within that framework, there are similarities. I would think they might differ in the timeline or how they are felt by the student, but I think there is something in that regard. And the second thing is that I haven't finished my PhD, so the story is still being written. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. This was exactly presented to my committee. I was telling the story to them, and I thought this was a good framework to talk about to them. But just the night before I presented this work, I was thinking, okay, now I have, okay, this was a summary I talked already about. This was my area in system dynamics, and my focus on the endogenous, tangible, and intangible elements. My domain is in academic institutions, and my purpose is to build a generic structure or model. This is very technical. This is exactly what I wanted to do. But back to this story. I was thinking, you know what? What does that mean? What does this, if you will, this diagram and how it looks, does it have any significance? How is this divergence? Can I make sense of it? And we in system dynamics typically look for a behavior and think about what is the structure that can cause this behavior, and then model it. So I stepped back and I saw this pattern of the divergence. At the beginning, I thought that I'm very focused. I know what to do or what I wanted to do. But then I felt I diverged. And then I felt that I came back to a conclusion, not necessarily at the same point, but this diagram is not very accurate. And if someone is interested in this negative part, that's just to make it clear and show that it's too different. So I started thinking about, we call this a reference mode in system dynamics, what is a typical behavior over time. And when we talk about reference mode, we think about variables that could cause this to happen or draw different diagrams, but I'm not drawing here for simplicity. I was thinking about, as I said, I've taken classes, I've done projects, I did presentations, reading, which involves books, papers, whatever. So how does that relate together in order to produce something like this, about something that grows and then declines? And I think here where I need to probably move to, okay, let me share this before. So I was sleeping on it, and while showering, I was thinking about, you know what, a PhD is like a goal, and you are diverging from that goal, and then you try to get closer to this. And you go through the conceptualizing about thinking about the variables that are involved and how they relate to each other, and then I just went out of the shower and then started sketching. This was the December 14th, which was my proposal defense in the early morning. And okay, I couldn't stop myself. I came here early and started putting this before it evaporates into a structure that I will share with you right now, which is a bit clearer. So I just, took a picture of my diary, which is I typically do.
Any reason that some of it's in English and some of it's in Arabic?
Yes, exactly. Yes, some of it. So I started here drawing this diagram. And I said, yeah, this means they're the same. And they put the date and what I was doing. And then I started drawing a causal loop diagram. And then I thought, you know what, I need stocks and flows. I won't bother you here. We will move to something more clear. And then I thought, you know what, let me draw it and go to the, so now, Saeed, I need to go to, okay.
What's window?
This one.
Oh, sorry.
I need to grab it to drag it.
Yes.
Okay. So it was Control ++. Okay, yes.
Or
Correct?
you can hold the control and use the,
Okay.
hold the control and use the wheel.
Okay. So what I'm showing here, remember the word divergence that I said? So divergence would be something, it's a difference between a desired research focus and what is the current research focus that I have. And I thought okay, if I have divergence, then I have to go do some exploration.
This is from this window.
Okay, so what I do?
It should be on this screen. I mean, whatever you are showing should be.
Oh, okay, sorry. So how to do that?
Yes, minimize everything.
Okay.
Minimize also this. We help you.
Yes, this mouse is really
It can be faster than you. So, here. Oops, where is it? So, it's showing here. Maybe we need to
duplicate. Yes. My son took the adapter for my laptop that works with this. So I have another adapter that works with my screen. So I came here, I found that the adapter is not, so I had to use a PC. I'm a Mac guy.
Can you work on here?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
Maybe
There's a delay.
Okay. It's working. Yes. Yeah.
So the research focus would be, and the desired research focus, this is the divergence, which is the difference, if you will, between them. And if you have divergence, so this means you're not on that final focus, you're exploring in order to find that. And when we explore, we actually generate research ideas. And the research ideas, as you get more research ideas, actually your research focus tend to go away because there are so many interesting ideas. But you need a mechanism for that. So this is what I call the curiosity loop, where you are curious to find what's going, and then you probably read here, and then you find this is interesting, and you read there, and you take classes, and every class rich with ideas and sometimes projects that you think are very interesting to do, which we will talk about in the summary of this. I won't spend a long time here. This is a very, I would say, in development.
This is interesting though, because for years we've been arguing in IT software development, when we go in and do like Six Sigma and Lean, one of the things of Six Sigma is reduce variation. And we argue, no, when you're developing ideas in software, creating new products, you need variation. because that generates new functions, new ideas, new thinkings. And this has been a huge argument of, do you need things that decrease divergence, more consistency, more standardized way, or do you need things that increase divergence to get those ideas? So it's interesting seeing this model, because I'm applying it to IT now, and the same thing goes on. Variation leads to ideas instead of research ideas, it's functionality ideas, but that decreases focus. You're no longer programming on narrow things. And so it's just, I'm very interested in this. So.
Yeah, exactly. So this was something, as you're doing this, you're actually getting more anxiety because you're seeing yourself doing interesting things, but there's no.
Do you have an anxiety chart?
I think probably I need to add this loop. So there's a second loop happening there. So if you're having research ideas, you might be starting to share those ideas, you know, and sharing sharing more ideas will get you feedback. And this mechanism we have, the CLM, it's about presenting half-baked work, initial ideas, and get feedback on them. And this would help you focus, actually, because you get feedback. You might think about this, or somebody will tell you, pursue this, or narrow that focus, etc. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you wait until it is baked. And by the way, sharing also is not only limited to these meetings. It's conferences, it's colloquiums, symposiums, and also writing conference papers, because all these are tools to entice feedback. If you go and start a conversation with someone without presenting thing or having something in hand, it's very hard to get a very helpful or useful feedback without it. So sharing means a lot of things, but this model is very, I would say, top level abstract. It's not detailed. There is another mechanism, too, that is taking place, is that as you explore, you actually learn. So learning, you're accumulating knowledge. And this knowledge, especially if you're at least reading in a certain topic or a couple of topics, will add depth to you. I'm assuming that the research ideas are the breadth, and this accumulated knowledge where you pick those nuggets are the depth of that knowledge. And this would provide corrective feedback to help you focus, which I call the subject matter depth. And I forgot about naming this loop, which is the collective learning loop. These are all, when you see a negative, this means this reduces the impact of this loop reduces this variable, if you look, if we can.
So say. One thing that seems maybe an implicit or latent structure here is, as you increase your knowledge, you increase your skills, and the speed of all these other loops begins increasing. So it's easier, I would think, to find new ideas because you know where you're looking, which may increase divergence rapidly, but you can also narrow it down. So it may, you know, when you don't know enough, it takes a long time to come up with an idea and a long time to narrow it down. But as you get better, that might be shorter cycles.
Exactly.
Because you're more skilled at saying, yes, this is interesting, but no, I don't want to do that, or no, that's not a good approach.
That's a very interesting thing. Yeah.
Then that would seem to take your oscillations into collapsing, sort of, or at least over time, the time between each oscillation.
You're right, because there are elements here. This flow, we call this flow, which is doing things. The exploration, how many books, how many courses you're taking, how many papers you're reading, this has a certain, you as a person, or the semester, or the allowable credits, or what have you. The sharing here, it could be weekly, it could be monthly, it could be biannually. So all these represent different time constants, if you will. So that's why the process doesn't necessarily, or this feedback of correction doesn't necessarily follow exactly what you're doing. You're exploring, you're still seeing yourself diverging, but that impact of learning or depth will come later, but at a faster pace. So you can converge at the end at a faster pace, maybe. We can know this when we start simulations and add, you know, the variables, the values, and experiment with this and see whether we're learning something new out of that. I'm sharing this structure today as a half-baked work. This is just initial conceptualization, building a structure, and trying to simulate it and see how it works. The model is simulatable. I mean, it can run. I might not have all the answers for why it behaves this way, but that's the beginning.
Have you ever thought about making this, and what this is an individual, but could this also be an organization? An organization has curiosity in exploring and ideas, and an organization has knowledge and subject matter depth. And it's now an entity as opposed to an individual. And what would the changes or similarities be?
I haven't thought about it yet.
I'm trying to make your life more difficult.
Thank you.
Should we also sit here and present ideas that require lots of work on his part? And we can just...
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my scope at the beginning, this is my personal view. It's not anybody's view. I shared this with Said at early stages, and he suggested, why don't you talk about it in CLM? I said, yeah, okay, why not? I thought just to draw this and leave it. I have to finish. But I thought it complements the story to talk about it and see, because especially I would say this loop and this loop are quite obvious, but you know, the sharing loop does not necessarily a common sense to everyone in at early stage, because typically I need to be better, I need to improve, but sharing it and bringing it earlier might be a better way.
In Agile, we call that fast feedback.
Yeah.
Going with the SD Club, don't try and make it perfect, just do something, get it out there, get fast feedback, fast
iteration. And that's exactly this Agile thinking, is that go ahead and share it and do something with it rather than keeping it. And as I was also talking to Venkat, who is interested with entrepreneurs, asking them to share and show them that sharing helps you eventually focus, not divert, or you're afraid of sharing because somebody will take your idea. Actually, you're building your depth, which could be faster. So your execution would be even better, even if someone stole that idea, because you're actually ahead of them. Not only this, when you share, people who you're sharing with will acknowledge that you are the owner of this idea, of this concept, because it's in a working paper, it's in a conference paper, it became harder. But if you keep it, nobody can guarantee in this world that what you are thinking about, nobody somewhere is thinking about the same topic.
That may not apply in industry as much as in academics, because I don't know what protections, like a patent, if this were an idea that becomes a patent, that's a very hard and fast protection, which may supersede things like a copyright that are, when the patent people don't know it's out there and they're kind of overworked, they grant a patent, even though the idea has been published in a paper, they may not be aware of it.
So even that's a very good point, because sometimes this sharing thing is a patent because you produce the document you applied. So you put more energy in creating this and going to a patent that protected rather than just keeping it as
you do say collegial feedback. So maybe this is a distinction between entrepreneurial feedback and cutthroat competition would be types of ways of sharing. And cutthroat competition is literally, I do my idea and someone else undercuts me, so I have to get better because my idea was now upstage. But it may be different then. So rather than I may be confusing those. You talked about collegial feedback.
That's the name of the loop that came to me, because that's the environment we operate in now. So without boring you with more details, I might run something, but I would rather also go to, let me see. I'd rather go to, let me put this disturbance to 0 and this exploration to 0, and
you can use the reset button perhaps.
I don't know where is it?
That's it, I think, on the bottom
here,
left corner. Yeah.
This one?
Oh, yes, this one.
Okay, cool. I'm playing with this version.
This is, I think?
This is Stella. Stella Pro, I guess. Correct, Said?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I have no disturbance.
Fred has a comment It says that it would seem the collective learning process should be a double loop structure, a positive loop that increases ideas, expands knowledge, etc., and a negative one that is goal-seeking to a theme.
Yeah, so he's saying that it could have two consequences. One that feeds back directly to research ideas. Yeah, I take that. My point was this: that the dominant, probably dominant effect would be this focus, because that's at least my experience. When I shared, I got people help feedback to narrow things and really focus rather than really giving me something totally away. And I think that's the control of the narrative that you do when you share with a tangible product like a presentation or a paper, rather than go and talk about an idea. Talking about idea would always create something, but when you are in a disciplined, formalized way and you're sharing specific items, people tend to help you to focus. That at least was my experience, but I'm open to that too. So if I have a small disturbance and an exploration kicking in at the same time, actually, this is where we see that the divergence is actually growing, because you're just building research ideas, but without any feedback. And if we start probably sharing a certain percentage of our ideas, we can see that we still diverged, before this becomes dominant and helps you come back to convergence.
Would there be something that represents what you have as collegial feedback as sort of self-editorial? Let's assume you're working on it yourself. It might take longer, but at some point you start winnowing out, or maybe is that the subject matter depth? Is your own subject matter depth?
I kept that
so
to
if there
subject.
was no collegial feedback, eventually you would still have a collapse and divergence,
Exactly.
but it might be much later, which might prove your point of the benefit of feedback versus
Yes.
holding it itself.
So if you look, this did not look the same behavior, growth and decline, because that loop kicked in, but the loop of sharing had a greater impact, because you're actually soliciting the feedback of people who might help you focus more. As a person yourself, you really debate so much that sometimes you reach an impasse with yourself, that where am I heading? So I thought this was an interesting work. I haven't done more to it, but I just thought to share it, and I'd like to continue to summarize what I started. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to. Does that bring it back, Said? How do you see it? Oh, I need to.
It has a delay. It's working now.
It's working?
It's okay.
Oh, cool. Nice. So I'd like to share a few tips through that process that I had. First of all is leading the process. You are the CEO of your PhD, not your advisor. And this starts from the committee formulation, from the plan of study, from the calls for meetings, from setting milestones, and also one-on-one consultations, building that relationship of trust and sharing with your committee. It's not just the advisor. If your relationship is only with the advisor, you are basically tilting the playing field, and you're not benefiting from other diverse views that could also help you make sense of that relationship with your advisor. Not every advisor-student relationships are cool or productive or conducive, but that's why you have a committee to share with. So I thought that's something I did, and I think this was very helpful. So in my dissertation proposal meeting, everyone literally has a stake in what I am doing. It was not just my work, it was their work too. Logging events. So I keep go ahead.
Correct. It says the dialogue between Raafat and team suggests there are time constants to be considered here. For example, what is the half-life of new ideas with or without patenting? Could reflect impact of competition, etc.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because this applies also to that, all these talks, the research ideas, the feedback, also the knowledge. They have a lifetime. They could decay. But at the same time, some of these research ideas could be your research portfolio after you graduate. So I was hesitant to include all these dynamics there, in addition to what Fred said. Thank you very much. This is very helpful. It is very hard to resist adding details to the model. I wanted to make it crystal clear about how I experienced that. Maybe people, as we share, probably this work might go places, might include other effects or levels of granularity to expand the work. So back to that, I think it was not possible to draw that story without logging the events and creating a journal to reflect on that, with its meeting, conversations, correspondence. I tend to keep all this so that I reflect on it in my, I would say, reflective journaling on what worked and what didn't work, successes and setbacks, whether you present an idea to your advisor and he would walk away and say, nah, this is not. Or if you get rejection from a conference or a journal or hard feedback in a meeting, all these are moments to be reflected on, not to be taken as just said as events that just pass. And also feelings. How did you feel with this? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you excited? Because that's another layer that shows where your passion is. As I was reading in some books or articles, I felt compelled to read them and finish them. And some of them I felt like, okay, when will this have finished? And I definitely know that, okay, this is not something I want to do, but that's something I want to do, despite that there is no clear connection now. Because at the very end, you are the CEO, you have to sell this to others. And if you're not convinced, it would be very hard sell to make. And this is just a file that I created for my journal where I logged committee meetings, conversations. I also was, after meetings, I send a summary, and if there is to-do list sometimes for advisors who promise to give you a lead or send you a paper, when they go, they would be immersed in their own work. So they need, nudging sometimes. And instead of this, I was, okay, let me follow something neutral. I summarize, I put to-do list, I put expected outcomes, and I just send it. And I kept this going. It's just a professional way of not stopping nagging, but I would also send, gentle reminders as well. But based on this is an agreement. I asked them to give me feedback if there is something that is summarized that was not accurate or not clear. And this was very helpful, I think. The other thing would be utilizing the assignments and projects. If you're taking classes, there are an ample opportunity to make use of the projects that you do. And with the advantage that, you have a structured supervision. You have a professor who is supposed to do this work with you. And the best thing is that you can move this work and go places with it as a conference paper, as a poster presentation, not to keep it at okay, that was a class assignment. There was an intellectual contribution there. There's time spent if you connect with that work. But sometimes we filter out these assignments thinking that, okay, it was an assignment. Especially the open-ended assignments where you're asked to, use, like in the latent structure class, use a structure and put your own case on it. this would apply to some students, and some students won't probably connect to this concept, but I found it very useful, and most of my work was a result of class projects.
Were you doing your master's throughout this, or are these just classes you took in your PhD span? Because what I found is I'm getting my master's done, there's so many classes, there's so many ideas. It's after every class I have new ideas and new thoughts, and it's a challenge to both capture them, and then you go into the next class, which is more classes and more stuff, that kind of decay of an idea really kicks in. So did you experience that, or was this, how did you address that?
So my classes, so I did not, my coursework involved, when I started here, I had no idea what system dynamics is. So I had a ton of coursework to finish. So it was not towards a degree or so, but I think luckily, because I formed my committee early on, the second semester. And when I took a class, I would go to my advisor or to one of my committee members, and I say, you know what, I have a project for a class. What do you think might be a good idea? And I am thinking about this. What do you think? I would get feedback. So that's kind of a sharing. And this, now in a sense, thank you, Tim, for pointing this out. That's a corrective mechanism that was kicking early on. So I was basically getting feedback on what projects to pick and what not to pick. Okay, so if you're on your own and picking, and there are so many interesting ideas, and you're not sharing that, space with the committee in each class. So it was an organizational design class, has nothing to do with the SD faculty. But I came and shared my thinking. I'm taking this class. What do you think if I'm thinking about this project? And said, what about you do this? This would be helpful. We have an issue here in the department that you want to explore. I said, okay, why not? Let me try it. Do you have a comment?
From your research story, it seemed like you came into your PhD, came to WPI knowing a rough area that you wanted to work into, right?
A rough, you say it rough. For me, it was not rough. It was focused. For me, I know what to do. And from the first meeting with Professor Said, I said, so about the committee, I said, I want to do this. And he was suggesting names for the committee, and I was immediately rejecting literally names because I said, they don't relate to what I'm doing. I'm glad I did this. However, he wouldn't let me continue with this focus. He pushed me, he nudged me away somehow. That, okay, focus on your courses now, and we have time for this. So this was how the disturbance thing is, that stop focusing on this, do your classwork, and think about it.
I wonder now if this is also the difference of part-time while doing full-time work, where you focus. For me, the class takes up every available ounce of free time I have, and not much more than that. Were you full-time during this?
I was full, and I had no time to think about research at all. Okay. I was doing 3 classes.
Right, so you had little time as well. Okay.
Well, whenever I was meeting my advisor, I know that plan of study and committee was important, because in my master's degree, I was about to, my graduation was about to be delayed for another semester, just because I did not formulate a plan of study. I did not have a committee there back then. But my advisor, when I walked in, I said, do you know that I cannot graduate this semester? He said, yeah, you did not form your plan of study. And I was like, okay. I didn't know that I have to. He said, you're a grown-up adult. You should know the rules. Okay. And I got a notification letter during summer, and I was traveling, and I came a few weeks later, and I read the letter. It was a warning. And by that time, I needed to move it. I already passed the graduation application. And okay, he said, go talk to the program administrator. And I went there, and I had to write a plan, and signed it up, and brought it for I wrote a letter appealing to this. And okay, I was lucky they accepted that. So one of the warnings that I had in mind when I started, plan of study, committee, because you cannot formulate a plan of study without a committee. It has to be there. So that's why they're in the same list. So that's what created my initial, I would say, anchor but I did not pursue it. I had to go, I would say, with the flow. That's what I meant by this, is that you accept change. I had no idea about working with research with higher education institutions, but since the idea presented itself and I had no option of going to an outside organization, I can do work here at WPI. I thought, you know what, why not? And it opened doors. And we also have to distinguish between letting go and losing. I mean, sometimes you let go of some ideas, and this doesn't mean you lost or you lost those ideas. They probably need more time to be baked and reflected upon. And the descent concept, when I stumbled on it, I liked it very much. I went, I built a model. I called the committee, hey guys, I have very interesting work. I showed them a model and a behavior, and my advisor said, okay, what is your goal? I'm like, okay, I'm excited about this. And it works. And he said, okay, in which context? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And this was like, okay, do you mean this was a bad idea? It did not mean it was a bad idea, but I had to let go from, keeping at it and pushing it this way, because I did not create a context for that idea. Some people might think the way I thought after that meeting, that I was a loser or I lost it, or how can I bring those guys together again and talk to them about an idea if they would push against me this way. But eventually, 1 year later, when that problem was very well developed, this was accepted in a plenary session at the conference and presented as one of the good papers that people have seen and gave me feedback on. So that this is a very subtle, I would say, concept. And embracing time delays. Embracing time delays is that also you need to absorb things rather than bounce things. So sometimes you get in a conversation with your advisor or committee members, and they will sometimes give you difficult questions that you feel compelled to answer on the spot. Whereas sometimes you need to think about it more. Improving or giving an immediate answer doesn't mean that you understand better. It means this is just sitting on the top of your head and you're very convinced about it. Maybe you need to think. And very often I had from Professor Saeed's comments, I don't need your answer right now. Go and think about it.
Fred says that he would really like to see the bullets in the slides 15 to 17. Tips made available later via email or a short document.
I will.
Much food for thought here.
Yeah, I will. I will share the presentation. Sure. So I sometimes I was thinking, okay, I couldn't answer him. What is this? But at the same time, he was asking me, please do not reply now. Think about it, sleep on it, and come back. And when you are under pressure that you have only a few meetings that you have with him or with her.
What was the pace of your meetings? Was it weekly, monthly, quarterly?
After the qualifier, I had almost every 6 weeks, probably a meeting. Yeah.
With the whole committee or just your advisor?
My advisor, okay, that's an interesting dynamics. That's because I had no place to sit here, so I was mainly sitting at home or in a room downstairs, far away. So every time I want to meet him, I had to email him, are you available? And then, but ever since I walked, I had my office just right next door. This became like he passes behind me, and I'm just there. Like, oh. Or just.
So was it 6 weeks every the committee?
Committee, and that's a good point. I have to reflect on this and create that chart of the frequency of meetings. I do have all the dates, so I could see that. But definitely, major meetings stopped 2 years ago. And
was that because you'd gotten your focus?
No,
Is there still divergence left?
Sorry?
There was still divergence to be had on your timeline. 2 years ago, if I remember, you're still doing like this.
Yes.
So,
Eventually, that meeting was after the project of Skoltech. This was our 5th meeting we had. And after that, we stopped meeting. 5th or 6th meeting. We stopped meeting after that, and I started to do more one-on-one because I thought this was more useful. I have material, and I need better focus on what I'm doing. And they encouraged me to publish and present rather than to work on the proposal. So we did not need to meet. We would review papers together. It will go around between them. I would work with one of the faculty closely to review a paper and then pass it to the next and get feedback, and we move. So it was mostly emails and one-on-one meetings. But the next meeting after that was my dissertation proposal. But because they were literally informed about what I'm doing, I did not need that number of meetings. So it's a mix, I would say. But when I was exploring and wanted to get feedback, I felt this was too fast. The pace was too fast that I was not developing enough.
between meetings.
Yes, and they were pushing harder. Because the more you put on the table trying to convince them and they feel you did not build that focus, the more they push. And the more they push, you feel you need to come faster. And if you come faster, less prepared, they push more. And this could be very devastating for your thinking, for your clarity, for your focus. So I think stepping away was helpful. And CLMs are very neutral. Colloquiums, you really hear, I would say, neutral opinions rather than in a committee. It's more of a different dynamics, I would say. So the last part would be sharing, updating, and sharing. It's a cycle, I would say. One of the sharing is venting. You need to talk to people, and tell them about your feelings. How do you feel? Frustrated, gossiping, I would say, or what have you. It helps. And writing. Writing with this, I mean, whether it's a project you write, or if it's a working paper or conference paper, it really helps you focus and really put meat on the skeleton of the idea. Because you need to read, you have to put literature, that beautiful idea which is floating as a model with nice behavior, unless you put the literature, put the conclusions, and make a problem statement, you come to judge yourself, is it worthy or not? Presenting, as I said, and building a story. Building a story, I would say this, because building a story helps you make connections. When you have your narrative, what you are passionate about, what you want to do, when you meet people, the outcomes are better. We probably alluded to that. And I found this, the first conference I went to, I was just an observer. The quality of conversations I had with the faculty that I thought would be helpful was very, I would say, pleasantry and just exchanging comments, nice area, I would be interested to hear. But the next year, when you have a poster presentations and people stop by and talk to, you are able to extract more value, if you will, from them. You can email them this and ask for their opinion. Not necessarily that they will get back to you, but you created that, dialogue with them. And it helps you foster connections. People who would think about you when this subject matter comes, they would email you something. Or in conferences, they would call you, and this is very helpful in terms of even consulting about publications. Where should I publish? Which journals, editors, etc. So I thought this was helpful. And this cycle, I wanted to close with it because it helps you also clean up your story. Remember that chart that I showed, how clean and nice it is? This was looking like this. when it was built. But any time I had a major thing, I was putting this bubble and creating that link. But when you come back to it, you are able to, massage it and manipulate it, and then you see the streams. These streams are not so clear as they are here and so beautiful. And no, this was created later, but this work in process was always there. And when in the meetings with my committee, I kept this my first slide to keep them in check. I go and start from the beginning, and where are we now? So they see how we are evolving over time. But then this could evolve into this cleaner version. That's how it worked with me. I don't know if it could work differently with others. And yeah, thank you very much. This was. I also clap for myself. Thank you very much for being here and for.
It's great. It's very helpful.
I hope it was helpful. Thank you. We're right on time, I guess. So we have an hour, and
Thank you.
you're very welcome.
I didn't realize we were live. They could hear us.
Oh yeah.
Should we turn off the?
Yeah. Any questions or comments here?
Oh, Fred just thanked.
Thank you, Fred, for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. So we need to stop the broadcast.
I didn't realize that's very cool that it's broadcasting and so subtle. It doesn't feel. And
Thank
remember
you.
originally
Say hi
we
to
got
Venkat.
cameras.
Thank
and
you.
it would really. So for next week, do I need to have a special format or something? Because mine's just going to be slides. It's not a model. To make sure is it PowerPoint slides is fine on a thumb drive?
No. Yeah.
Okay. Even if it's Microsoft, it doesn't have to be.
Visual slides.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay.
So
where's that?
Said, what is that? Yes, here.